Hello, everyone. We are moving into chapter 6. Will be the last chapter in week 2, and this is talking about challenges to patients. So the objectives are what is a healthy wellness? Self-image of one is important. What happens when they become ill? Choosing to remain a patient, what are several types of privileges and accommodations, and identifying important changes a patient may experience when they become part of a healthcare institution, whether inpatient or outpatient. So we're going to jump right into challenges to patients. One of the biggest challenges for a patient is actually transitioning from being a well patient to being an ill patient or have a diagnosis in general. It can affect you physically, psychologically, socially, and spiritually. How many of you guys have had an injury and you faced this challenge yourself? I know for me, I can think back, probably one of my most recent experiences was my C-section. And as much as I knew about abdominal surgeries and how it was going to affect me, it still was a big change for me to not be able to do the things I wanted to do. Some of these things that your patient will be dealing with will be both long-term or short-term, but it still relatively affects them the same way. And even though we strive to be healthy and do everything we can, it doesn't always work out that way. Maintaining wellness. How many of you guys would say you have a healthy lifestyle? Really, wellness ensues from maintaining health-supporting habits over a lifetime. The best habits that you can do is good nutrition, sleep, and exercise. And even in the healthiest people, the people can still be sick. And I'm sure you heard of Joe did everything right and got cancer, where Sue did everything wrong. She smoked, she ate bad food, she had bacon every morning, and she lived to be 110. You just don't know. It's dependent on the patient. And even though you are living your healthiest lifestyle, it can still be an effect on you. Also, crossword puzzles, Sudoku, reading, and playing games, those are all good for you, but they're really healthy for your brain because you're keeping your brain active. And you can teach some preventative approaches that are important for your patients. Becoming ill is a form of loss. But what are you losing? You're losing your health. And our patients have to understand that and kind of work through that on their own. They have a feeling of loss when becoming ill or impaired that may take place in decreased physical or mental function. My pop-up has dementia. He's dealing with the loss of his mental function, and that's really tough. So along with the caregivers in the family who are dealing with it as well. Everyone who goes through these changes, and I know I've said this many times, but every patient, every family, every caregiver, everyone's going to be different in how they cope with what's happening. Some factors could include the physical and emotional effects of the pathological process itself, the alteration in the person's environment or social roles, and the coping mechanisms that the patient has developed throughout his or her life can make a difference in how people cope. Patients will react differently to each caregiver. That's happened to me personally. I know some patients like me better, some patients like my PT better. Don't take it personally. It's just how they're responding. And you as a clinician, as a healthcare provider, as a professional, need to understand that that can't be taken personally, and you can't respond in a manner that's inappropriate. You have to keep that relationship personal. So a loss of former self-image is a feeling of self-alienation or not being yourself. Is temporary when we're having a bad day. When that feeling is from loss of a function or previous physical appearance, the feeling is of losing one's self-image can be permanent. And as you see in this picture here, you can kind of see the before picture of this is how I felt I was able to move freely and not have any restrictions, and now she has a brace and a cane, a lobster and crutch, and so that sort of makes her feel alienated or a morph of oneself, and that feeling is hard to kind of get over, and it really makes a lot of sense to me. And even though we shouldn't, we still do judge a book by its cover at times, and usually we are the hardest on ourselves. I know that I am, for sure. Part of your job and your success depends upon helping the patient either reclaim that old image or discover a new realistic image of themselves. Again, every patient is going to be different. I have had patients who didn't want to go to bingo because they had a walker or a cane, and really that's a minor instance, but that can really affect a patient in how they're healing and how they move forward with their life. Sometimes you have to find a new body image for them, depending if they're a burn patient or something happens. That's going to be part of your job to sort of help them discover something that's more realistic for them. At times, one's self-image depends on one's self-body image. And I don't need to know. I'm actually kind of glad this slide is on PowerPoint, not in the classroom, because you can kind of think about yourself. How is your own self-image or your own self-body image? There is a close relationship between all of that and how you respond to it. Our society has this ginormous fashion industry that says we should all be a size 0. And once we have a baby, we should be bouncing back to our pre-baby bodies in no time. Well, that's not realistic. That's not what we thrive on. But our society says that that's what should happen. And sometimes that can affect our self-image. Someone who gets this illness or physical impairment has to constantly be reminded of this day in and day out, and that can be really difficult. And again, just like we said before, it's sort of your job to say, like, it's your job to guide them to be comfortable in their new body. There are some better examples here, like a new colostomy, a burr holes, mastectomy, Bell's palsy. These are some of those things that you're going to have to kind of guide them and help them feel better about themselves. There's institutionalization and psychological stress. To institutionalize a person is to place a person in the care of an institution. Not everyone is discharged to home when they're done. Sometimes they have to go through a whole other process. My pop-up had a very minor procedure and it enhanced his dementia and he couldn't go home. So he had to go to a rehab, and then after rehab he had to go to an assisted living or a nursing home. And that was something that was very challenging for him to kind of understand and get through. And you have to know that you are going to be helping your patient with these emotions throughout that whole process. It can affect jobs. It can affect the family unit, even students. If you can't return to school and you're worried about, right now, I feel like we're all sort of institutionalized to our home. I mean, that's not the best example, but you're worried, and that can cause a lot of psychological stress on what's going to happen next. A lot of patients feel setback. And I know that this bullet point here under psychological stress is that they feel a setback if they can't go home from hospitals right away. Their homes have magical doorways, and once they walk through it, it'll all be better. And what's funny about this slide is I felt like this once I had my son Reed, is I was in the hospital on Tuesday. It was Monday, and they said, you should probably stay another night, but you don't have to. And I was like, nope, I want to go home. I'm done. I'm over it. If I get home, I will just feel better. And I remember thinking that thought in my head. I really should have stayed another night, but it is what it is now. But it's that stress that kind of comes over you, that if I just get home, I will do better. But that's not always the best option for the patient. For patients detoxing, it's sometimes admitting that they have a problem in the first place. And then also when there are changes in doctors or therapists or caregivers, that really is a moment of stress. When I was in the hospital for so many days with Reed, and a new doctor came in every day, every night, and it was frustrating because I had to retell my story of what was happening. It can feel the same for a therapist as well. So the major losses associated with institutional life is your home, your privacy, and your independence. For anyone who has been in a rehab or in a hospital, you'll see that it's it's not your home. There's no privacy sometimes. Sleep is interrupted. You might have a roommate that's noisy or snores, or someone keeps the TV on all night. Typically someone is in almost every hour to check your vitals or get blood work. Depending on what's happening, it can be a big challenge for patients. And that home, that is the magical, magical place. And that is the safe haven for most people. If I can just go home, it will be okay. But it's not always the best place for them to be if they're not able to walk on their own, or if they live on their own and they can't get up the steps or make their own meals or get dressed. That's obviously not a safe place for them to be. And they have to understand that. And it will be your job to tell them that's not always the best place. Don't accuse people of faking their symptoms, approaching them and asking them when they do not want to go home. Make sure that they need the support. There could be other things that are happening that you don't know about. We'll talk about that. And again, this is sort of what I've already said, is that the physical comforts of home can make some patients feel better, but can they function? Can they go up the 10 steps that they have in their house? Can they make their own meals? Can they pay their bills? Remembering, can they take their medication? Those kind of things. The biggest complaints of not being home is that the bed is uncomfortable and the food is terrible. I know for sure I just want to be in my own bed. Even when you go on vacation, sometimes after a while, you just want to be home in your own bed. And think about how patients must feel when they're not in their own comfortable bed. So some things that might help in an extended care facility or skilled nursing facility, they encourage patients to bring their own pictures, blankets, pillows. For my pop-up, we brought his own bed sheets, his own chair, pictures, plane models that he had, his own desk that was his, area of work. That helped him feel more at home, and that helped decrease some of the stress. And really, for him, bringing his desk and his desk calendar was a huge decreaser of stress for him. Changing up your routines can be stressful. If I know I have my coffee at 10 o'clock every morning because I wake up late, but they serve breakfast at 8, that's going to be a little bit of a stressor for your patient. Or a child who takes a nap at a certain time. When Reed was in the hospital, I know that he did not take a nap because he was stressed out. It was a terrible feeling for him. Not being able to attend social groups, someone who goes to church every Sunday or goes to Sheets every Thursday morning for the free coffee, or bingo, or, things like that. Those are all stressors for your patients, and that could be hard. It would be hard for you. Think about the things that you do on a daily life. Go to the gym, go do certain things. That can be hard for even yourself. This slide talks a little bit about what a patient keeps in their dresser drawers or closet. Can tell you a lot about a person. Not that you should go snooping, which you shouldn't be doing, but if you see that they have a candy bowl, do they have a sweet tooth? Is the patient diabetic? Are there lots of cards, food, and flowers where you can see there's a lot of family involvement? Or do you notice that there's a lack of family coming? Again, you don't want to just go through someone's belongings and say, hey, I want to find out more about you. Let me look through your dresser drawers. That's not appropriate. But if you are helping your patient get dressed and you say, okay, well, we're going to stand up and go over to your dresser and get some socks. Well, you're going to be standing there anyway. It can be part of a treatment for you. If you find something that shouldn't be in the room, you need to make sure that you document everything. That way you can document that you had found a wallet and you had reported it to the nursing staff and the nursing staff took it from there. Then they know that nothing had happened and it's not lost in your hands. That would be a problem. Privacy. Patients are not able to have privacy for basic needs. Again, I know I keep bringing my pop-up up about this, but I think it's one of the best examples where he needs help to shower now. And that can be a struggle. And again, put yourself in those kind of situations. How would you feel coming up into that? having to be showered by someone of the opposite sex that you don't know, that's not your significant other, that's younger or older than you, it might feel a little awkward, and that can cause some strain. That can increase the anxiety, that can increase fears, that can increase the stressor that your patients are having. If you're in a hospital, the hospital gowns can be your biggest lack of privacy. Always double up. Typically, the gown is open in the back. Every time I walk my patients, you put on another gown to go from that's open in the front, so they're completely covered. And if you see someone in the hallway who is not covered, go grab one for them, because you have to think about how they would feel or how they would react. The lack of independence you're going to find. Every minute of the day is scheduled for the patient, from testing to food to visitors to therapy. That is going to increase your patients. Sometimes they don't always have their right to move around as what they would. Diets are restricted, loss of freedom. You can't have the snacks that you like. I was just really upset because the Slurpee machines are down at Sheetz and I want a Slurpee. I can't have one. Those kind of things. Some diets are restricted. You might find that your patients can't have fluids without being thickened. Have you ever had a thickened cup of juice or a thickened coffee? It's not fun, and that can increase some anger. For us, we're more of an ambulatory care setting. These are where procedures are being formed in an ambulatory setting. This stay is very brief. In most cases, they don't involve an overnight stay, like a doc in a box or patient first. So they walk in, they get their care, they leave. They're not sick enough for an inpatient administration. And again, these type of people are listed below. I'm not going to read all of these to you. You can pause the video and read them yourself. These settings are not just for emergency care patients, also refers to outpatient radiation, dialysis, wound care, outpatient physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech. Those can all be included in like an ambulatory care setting. Our patients come in, they get their care, they leave. That happens fairly often. At times, patients can feel jealous because they're not on an inpatient stay. I think that's mostly because they don't get that 24-hour care. They don't get the attention that they need. You get an MRI in an outpatient, you don't hear results for 3 days to a week, where in an inpatient stay, you get it within that day, or lab results, those kind of things. Ambulatory care settings can take away time from work and family. When you think about your patient typically comes how many times a week? 3 times for 4 weeks. That's 3 times a week that they're taking off of work, away from family, to come see you. That's challenging. Don't always be so upset if your patient comes late or cancels often. There are usually reasons for why that's happening. It's your job to help these people feel more at home and relax, so they're more willing to come. The home care environment. Has anybody worked in home care before or shadowed? Home care has its own kind of challenges. Typically, the patient's home is not equipped. It doesn't have the equipment that it needs, and it has lack of space or resources. It's not going to always have TheraBands or step-ups or things that you can use to help, wedges or bolsters, or, think about all the things you have in an outpatient clinic. Not every clinic is going to have that. The patient becomes confused on how they treat the professional. Are you a guest? Are you hired help? Do I offer you a drink and a snack? Are you allowed to use my bathroom? These are confusing times for a patient. It's hard to understand what they actually need. And at times that can increase the stress because you're not really sure if they're invading your home or not. Some patients do have a sense of relief when the professionals come. They're able to help move furniture or assist them in something that they need. Change a light bulb. I've done it before. And sometimes it's a sense of relief for a patient when they're coming. Don't go into someone's home and tell them that this is dumb, you shouldn't be doing this, your chair should be here, you should be walking like this. That's not what your patient is going to want to feel when you're coming in. So just be cautious of that. So weighing losses and privileges, in other words, the privileges are not designed to convey permission for the person to remain in the patient role indefinitely, and recovery is not a reasonable goal. The person is expected to begin to learn challenging of living well with impairment or providing impeding death. So we want to think about our goal is to get our patient better, but if we can't, if it's not reasonable, they are expected to begin to learn a different way of managing their life. In the book, there is a reflection that I'd like you to kind of read over, and that's on page 111 at the top. It starts with, what privileges did you have as a child when you were sick or sustained an injury? So just read over that and kind of see how you feel about that. Some patients like to choose to remain a patient. I am sure that all of us can think of at least one person or one patient that this has happened to. Patients sort of relish in that patient role for different reasons. A lot of times it's the attention that they're getting. A patient can be labeled as malingering. Well, I'm sorry, it's starting to rain if you hear that. This is a patient that pretends there's something wrong, or their symptoms are worse than they are, just so they don't have to stay, because they're getting that care and that nurturing from you. Also, it says here, some patients' problems are complex in other ways that can lead to mistakenly labeling them as malingering. They may have a mental illness that mimics the signs of malingering. Sometimes symptoms can be a diagnosis that the patient is labeled, but really they weren't diagnosed correctly. I've had a lot of patients who came in and their pain wasn't getting better, and the doctor wasn't doing an MRI or wasn't doing kind of that next step. And the doctor was telling me that they thought that they were malingering, but really they had a tear, but he wasn't doing the steps that he needed to. So don't always assume that they're a malingering patient. Another complex patient is non-compliant, one who refuses to follow clear and necessary measures prescribed by the healthcare profession. It happens in all settings. Outpatients might refuse to do a home exercise program or walk correctly with a cane. Inpatient might just refuse therapy when they know that that's the thing that they need. Not all the time is a patient non-compliant because they're not doing something. It might be due to something else. So if they're not purchasing their medications, that may not necessarily be non-compliant. That might just be, let's talk about now. No one is working because of the virus. So if a patient isn't buying their medicine, it's not that they're being non-compliant, it's that they're financially strapped and can't afford it. So make sure that you're reading into the entire scenario and not just always assuming that it's non-compliant. So why would someone remain a patient? Well, escape or financial gain. If you think about your workers' comp patient, sometimes they're on workers' comp and they get paid for not working. That also might be a reason to malinger, where their symptoms aren't getting better, so they need to stay in therapy. Just making sure that you're aware of that. They also started a work hardening therapy program to help patients return. If you've heard of that, that's sort of a longer treatment session, typically every day, for at least 2 hours of their doing jobs that their job would need to do. So if you think about housekeeping, they would be folding laundry, cleaning, making beds. So those are things that you would be doing in your clinic with your patient to make sure they're able to return to work without pain. Social gains. Patients remain sick. They get more attention. They get meals made for them. They get picked up and dropped off. And sometimes that attention is nice for patients. More attention at social gatherings. They get first in line. Someone pulls up a chair to let them sit. Those kind of things. As a healthcare provider, these patients can be really, really frustrating because as a provider, all we want to do is for our patients to get better. We want them to be healed faster, happy in what they're doing, healthy, and when our patients just aren't willing to go back, it can be hard. So just making sure that, again, you're approaching them appropriately without being nasty. And making sure you're documenting everything that you see. That's really your best line of defense. If your patient says they can't touch their toes, but then you see them pick their purse up off the ground, that's a clear sign that they are able to do it. They're just not wanting to. So making sure you're aware of that. If you have any questions for me, please don't hesitate to email. let me know. I'm happy to help. Otherwise, that is chapter 6. So we will talk to you soon in the next chapters. Thanks, guys. Bye.